Hey guys, it's Kevin again, and this is going to be my review for The Originals, Season 1, Episode 19, An Unblinking Death. And this was another great episode. I will say this was not as good as last week's episode. However, this episode kind of changed some things. Now, it was not the best episode of the season. Last week's was definitely the best episode of the season. However, this one, kind of changed some things around, and I liked this episode. I thought it was really good. And it definitely, it focused a lot on Cammy, we haven't really focused a lot on Cammy. We've seen Cammy here and there, but we haven't focused too much on her. She's basically been a background character for the season, and we haven't really seen the point of her. But then when her uncle Kieran was attacked, when Father Kieran was attacked, basically, that's when it got really interesting. And that's what this episode focused on. It focused on Father Kieran and Cammy, which I was kind of surprised about. I thought it was going to focus on what it focused on last week, but it focused on that whole thing. And as a result, there was no Davina, there was no Monique in this episode. They were not in the episode, so that whole storyline was not even in the episode. But let's just get to it. So we see that this priest is preparing for the sacrament for Father Kieran, who hears a voice and turns to see Bastiana there. She tells him it's too bad his faith can't save him, and the priest, his nephew Sean, cuts his throat. She holds the cup of blood out, tells him to drink, slaps it out of her hand, and he's hallucinating about Sean's death and doesn't realize it was Cammy offering him a drink. Now, that was really weird in the beginning, honestly. I'm like, okay, this is weird. He ends up calling Cammy a bitch, says he knows who she is. Josh helps Cammy hold him down. Kieran comes out of it briefly, realizes it's Cammy before he gets nutty again. Basically, Kieran's going crazy at this point, and it was really weird in the beginning. She tells Josh it's a good sign that he came out of it for a minute and says he just needs a shock to the system. And she says she knows how they might be able to fix him. So Klaus is ransacking the library looking for his mother's grimoire, and Elijah comes in and asks what he's doing. And Klaus says he thought it was the witches that took it, but since he taught them a lesson, he now suspects Elijah. He tells Klaus that he hid the grimoire so he couldn't use it to mess with the Crescent Moon Wolves, and that had to do with the Haley plot, which I'll get to, but Marcel ends up calling Cammy, who you can see that Marcel and Cammy do have a lot of chemistry. I must say that definitely they have a lot of chemistry, and I was rooting for Cammy in this episode. I thought that was definitely a good thing that we got they got us rooting for Cammy. But Marcel calls Cammy, offers to help her with Kieran. Josh told him what's going on, but she doesn't want to risk his life by coming to her. She tells him to stay away. They bring in a doctor to see Kieran, and he snaps and growls at the guy like an animal when he tries to take his pulse. So Klaus takes a call from Marcel, tells him that Cammy needs him and is with Kieran, hangs up. The doctor tells them he has to tell the authorities, but then Cammy has Josh compel him to forget it. But then Josh screws that up, and Cammy asks the doctor to sedate Kieran, then asks him about electroshock therapy to treat psychosis, and he says in some patients it can reboot the brain, but they only do it in extreme cases. She says her uncle's case is quite extreme and was caused by a witch hex, so it's a pretty extreme thing, they have to do. So Kieran is then hooked up to an ETC machine, and he tells the doctor there's a special place in hell for him. Klaus comes in, says it's a gruesome scene and that he's there to do what her cowardly boyfriend, basically talking about Marcel, will not do. He says he got a call to come to her rescue. He says she needs to stop the madness. The doctor begs her not to make him do it, and Cammy says she'll do it herself. Charges up the machine. Klaus tells her not to make her uncle suffer, but she says it's his only chance. Puts the shocking parts to his hand. He screams in pain, and Kieran comes out of it, asks Cammy what she did to him. She says they need to do it again because he's semi-coherent, and Klaus tells the doctor to check him, and the doc says Kieran's heartbeat is irregular, and he can't take anymore. Klaus pulls her outside for private word and tells Cammy the story doesn't have a happy ending, and he tells her the treatments will kill Kieran, and he doesn't want her to have a life to have to live like that. She tells him she can't surrender because, but he says it's time to let go, and she says it's not his decision. So basically, she kind of wants just closure with Kieran. I think that's what this is about. It's all about closure. Josh tells the doctor, stay back from Kieran since he's murdery, and the doc wants to talk to the, because Kieran's just going crazy at this point. He wants to kill everybody, and it's the witch hex that did it to him. Kieran has a fit, bites his own hand bloody like he wants to eat it, and Josh calls out for some help. So, then what happens is Kieran is at this point in cardiac arrest. Klaus tells Cammy to look away, plunges his hand into his chest, massages his heart, and she asks Klaus to give him his blood. Klaus thinks the Hex will do with Kieran's body. She begs him to do it. Klaus bites his wrist, feeds Kieran. She watches him flatline and cries. Klaus looks at her thoughtfully as she cries. And Cammy lights a candle for Kieran, and Klaus tells her he has to go. She asks what happens next, and he says Kieran will wake craving blood, but that he will be back before them. And she says Kieran will be furious with her, and he says the goal of turning him was to give her a chance to say goodbye. She asks him to stay a bit longer, and he agrees. So basically, Kieran has now been turned into a vampire, and everything seems like it's okay. So Kieran wakes up, asks Cammy what happened, and Kieran is now his normal self. He's not craving blood or anything, but he says he could feel the Hex like a living thing inside of him. He says it's gone. She hugs him, but then Klaus says they have news to break to him. And Klaus says the Hex was broken by his death. And Kieran asks how long he was dead. Klaus says a few hours. So basically, Kieran's dead now, and he's now a vampire. Cammy tells him that she made Klaus do it. Kieran says the devil has a deal for him after all. So Klaus tells him the hunger will get stronger, and Kieran says he knows how it will work. And Klaus says he has to feed or die. And Kieran says he's dead already. He has to be alone with Cammy for a private moment. She then thanks Klaus for being kind and helping her today. And he walks out and leaves them alone. So everything seems like it's okay with Kieran. So Klaus tells Kieran that she found everything except the key he asked for. He says it's an important part of their family legacy. And she has to find it. She promises to. And he tells her he's sorry. He never wanted her to be involved in anything like this. She says this can't be how it ends. And he says it was the only way, and he made peace with it a long time ago. He hugs her and tells her he doesn't know how bad it's going to get, and he doesn't want her to see it. He makes her promise to go without looking back, and she does, and he lets her go, and she walks out sobbing. So it's pretty sad there. So Kieran kneels, prays in the attic of the church. Klaus confronts Genevieve about the attack on the wolves and his child, and she says the wolves have many enemies, and he says he has seen the depths of her cruelty, and she says she didn't attack them. She says she may seem so ugly by the glow of his pure, precious Cammy, and that she heard about her recent loss. He tells her Kieran is free from the Hex and is a vampire now, and Genevieve says the Hex is too powerful and will return if it hasn't already. So Kieran's hand is shaking as he draws a knife to take his life. Bastien is there and tells him not yet. She says his work is not done, that he must make a penance with those he holds dear. And Genevieve tells Klaus that the boundary spell won't work now that Kieran is dead. And sure enough, he walks out the door with an evil look on his face. So, it actually didn't work. And then, probably the best scene of the episode, I really love this scene, was really surprising. Cammy's praying in a church, and I knew shit was gonna go down. You know, the moment they said, oh, it's not good, it's not, you know, it's not all the way cured, I'm like, shit is gonna go down in the scene. Cammy's praying in a church. Kieran comes right into the sanctuary, looks up in shock, asks if he's changed his mind. He says he has, pulls a knife on her, and basically tries to pull a knife on her attacker. She's forced to jump down over banister, crawl for the doors, tells her not to fight, leaps down and says, in death we are whole again. He drags her back towards the altar. Sean is there, tells him to kill her. And Bastien is there ordering him to do it as well. But then Klaus is behind him, snaps Kieran's neck, and he says, you deserve far better than this, and stakes Kieran. You know, Klaus basically saved Cammy from that, so, I mean, applause to Klaus, because, you know, Cammy could have died if it wasn't for, Klaus saving them, and I thought that was actually really well done, the way they did that. So Marcel gets a call from Klaus, and who tells him he never thought he had anything to do with the attack on the wolves. He says the priest is dead and his exile is suspended for 24 hours. So he comes, he can come bury his friend, and Marcel asks why he's doing this. Klaus says Cammy woke in the dark, alone and scared, and called Marcel's name. Klaus says if he can't offer her comfort, he should. Marcel comes to Cammy, kisses her, and holds her while she cries. And Marcel comes to Diego's lair, tells him Kieran's dead, asks Josh if he got it, and he hands over the key and says it was around Kieran's neck. And like he said, Josh says he doesn't feel good about taking it, but Marcel says people will be coming after it, and them having it will protect Cammy. And Marcel tells them the city is at a breaking point, every faction will be up in arms, and he says they need to be ready. So, yeah, that was Cammy's plot. I thought it was a really strong plot. You know, Cammy and Kieran and Klaus's plot just really, really strong there. Now let's get the subplot which had to do with Elijah and Haley and the wolves and everything. Let's just get to that. Elijah says there could be an uprising that could put her more at risk. Elijah says he won't let Klaus turn New Orleans into a war zone, and Klaus says war was brewing before they came back, and tells Elijah to open up his ears and listen to the drums of the war. So Haley's working on breathing exercises, and Eve tells her to chill out and not worry about having the baby there instead of in a hospital. And Eve says her instincts will guide her. Haley says she knows Klaus won't change diapers and she'll be doing it all alone. Eve says she doubts that, and to underscore her statement, and Elijah's at the door. He asks to speak to Haley as a conspirator of the supposed wolf uprising. He goes to a barn to talk to her. Ollie and Jackson are there too, and he tells him that an alliance with Klaus is a mistake. Jackson says he knows about Klaus' reputation, but if it rings could help them control their curse, he doesn't care what else Klaus is after. Elijah says that many in the quarter will consider this a provocation. So Elijah's smoky and charred but alive. The other wolves were all knocked down. Then Elijah reminds Haley that she signed a pledge to peace, and she says she wants a better life for the pack. He tells her that an alliance with Klaus will not offer that. They hear a motorcycle, head out to investigation. A guy pulls up on a dirt bike and asks who's in charge. Elijah walks with interest, does his speedy vampire walk, and grabs Jackson out of the way. Just as the bike and its rider explode, he and Jackson barely clear the blast zone. So Elijah's smoky and charred, but he's alive and he's okay. So the other wolves were all knocked down by the blast. Ollie checks to see if Haley's okay. She's looking around, picks up a crying wolf child, calls for Jackson, hands the boy off to him, and Haley calls Elijah over. One of the wolves is seriously injured. The wolf had a blistering sore, and Elijah says there was wolves bang in the bomb, and she asks him to help them, and then she goes to do triag on other wounded wolves. So Eve asks where she learned to do the first, and she's working. And Haley tells her that as a teenage runaway, you learn a lot. Ollie's enraged. Ollie rants about vampires compelling people to do their dirty work. She tells him to take over while she goes and confronts who she thinks did this. And she says she's going to see Marcel and leaves. Haley calls Haley calls Elijah, not Marcel, and says she'll be back as soon as she can, but won't tell him what she's doing. She says she's fine, asks him to take care of the pack while she's gone, and hangs up. And then he tells Jackson she's okay, and Elijah says that the bomb could have been worse. But then he spots an incendiary device under one of the trailers. He tells Jackson to get everyone out of there, but it's too late. Bombs are going left and right at this point. Some wolves run, some are injured, and others are obviously dead. So, it's crazy at this point. Out of the wolf camp, Elijah walks through the smoking ruins and injured wolves. Jackson kneels by one dead wolf. Then Ollie screams for help, tries to lift a trailer off a wolf. Elijah comes to help, easily lifts the mobile home off the woman. Haley walks into Diego's lair and attacks him. She tells him someone attacked her back, and she tells him to tell her where Marcel is while she has a heart underneath her hand as a death threat. She tells him families die, and he gives her the address and says Marcel's in town and that's where he'll be. So Haley calls Klaus, asks where he is. She tells him about the suicide bomber at the camp and says she thinks it's Marcel that set them up. Because they're trying to figure out who would have brought this, no one would just randomly come up and try to attack them. There's obviously someone who set them up, so she pretty much thinks it's Marcel. And Klaus is trying to talk to her and help Cammy get Kieran sedated at the same time. It's kind of cool that way that scene's going on. But he tells Haley that as soon as he's done here, she will have his undivided attention. He tells Josh to compel the doctor to forget this. He asks Haley to please stay out of trouble, and she tells him not to worry and says Elijah is with her. And she walks into a deprecate warehouse by the river alone. So Elijah's not with her, as we know. Elijah has no idea where she is. She's kind of lying to Klaus at this point. Elijah and Jackson tend to Eve, and Elijah asks Ollie why she's not healing. And he says she never activated the wolf gene, so she can't heal. And Elijah offers his blood to heal her. Ollie says she would rather die than that. And Ollie says they can't let the vampires get away with it. And Jackson says they don't even know who did it. Ollie says the hell we don't, takes off angry and ready to fight back. So Haley finds Marcel drinking alone, says, and here we have, we basically find out if Marcel did or not, which we pretty much knew he, we didn't know if he did or not. So he says he would offer her one, but points to her bump. He offers her a seat instead. She tells him it's a sweet pad, and he says it's temporary, and a friend hooked him up with it. And he says she still has some friends that warn him of things, especially people coming to accuse him of things he didn't do. He tells her she didn't have to work with Diego over like that. and tells her they're long overdue for a chat. He tells her she's a tough girl, looks a lot like her dad, and she tells him he knew her whole family, and if she knew them like he did, she would know how many enemies they had. He tells her that the Crescent Moon Pack was bloodthirsty back in the day and always killing to gain power. He had the curse done to put an end to the violence without killing them all. And he says he has a thing about kids and says she's heard. He calls her Andrea La Bonnerie and says she's living proof of the policy. So that was definitely interesting. So Haley asks how long Marcel has known who she is. He says he figured it out after the wolves came out to the plantation house. She asks if he killed her parents and know who killed them. And he says he got there afterward, found her in her crib, and he says she was the last La Bonnerie, and he took her to Father Kieran so she wouldn't be a pawn in a power game. So he offers her money to go away, start over. He says he's not the guy who attacked the pack, but says that he might be one day if things don't calm down. Haley asks if his plan is to get out of town so Elijah and Klaus will follow her, and he says that would be a positive side effect. And she asked why he doesn't leave instead, and he says he was born there, and she reminds him she was too. Marcel tells him the suicide bomber was a compulsive gambler. Well, we're pretty much sure at this point it's not Marcel. And he tells her was a compulsive gambler who owed debts to the human casinos, and he tells her that when things go bad again, he wants her to remember that he tried to get her clear out of it again. I thought that was a really sweet scene, honestly. Elijah walks through the camps of dead wolves and into the big barn where the injured are treated, and Elijah, looks at him like he's seeing him anew, and Jackson says he wants to make this piece safe for Haley and the baby. So Ollie walks over Eve, and as she starts to wake, she asks him how long she looks, and he says she looks fine. And, she tells him he's a terrible liar. And he asks who will lead them, and says Jackson wants them to bow down to the hybrid, and that Haley isn't one of them. Eve asks what he's done. She says she knows he wouldn't hurt his own people. And Ollie closed the door, tells her that they're not going to find out. He says that if they did, all those people would have died in vain. They're not going to find out who did this. What the pack is not going to find out about this. And she begs him no as he approaches. He smothers her and tells her he's sorry. That definitely was a big thing. So Holly, who's Holly? Ollie riles up the wolves. Elijah watches as Haley joins them, asks what he's doing, and what's going on. He says Ollie is making a move for power in the wake of a tragedy, and he tells her there was another attack after she left. He tells her Jackson will need her help and says the wolves will want vengeance and blood for blood. So she goes to Eve's deathbed and cries. So Eve has been killed, basically. It's kind of sad. Tells her in troubled times, people look to the loudest, not the best to lead. And, that was definitely really big. So Haley says a silent goodbye to Eve and then goes out to see the wolves, and Ollie's still rounding them up. So after this, Klaus and Elijah have this really interesting conversation. Klaus tells Elijah, he's ready to give up on the peace accord now that all hell is breaking loose. Elijah hands Klaus the Grimoire and says he needs it if he's going to make the tree with the wolves work. Klaus asks if Haley's responsible for a change of heart. Elijah says if he has to choose a side and they're coming more, he chooses them and toasts Klaus to their victory. So that's how the episode ended. So definitely, as I said, things are starting to heat up. It's definitely going to be really interesting. I'm wondering if Haley is going to get away, from all of them by the end of the season. I kind of feel like that's how it's going to end, is that Haley's going to leave town. Because, Marcel said, do you want to leave town? And, it seemed like she was going to in this episode, but she didn't. I'm wondering what's going to happen. But now Kieran and Eve are both dead. This was a great episode. It was not as good as last week's, but it was still a great episode. I love the whole plot with Kieran and Cammy, and I love the whole suicide bomber plot. I thought that was really well done. I pretty much thought Eve was going to die, but I didn't think she'd die this early. But let me know what you guys thought about the episode. That's it for my review. I hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you guys in my next video, which will be my review for Fargo. So see you then. Bye.